just before we start, just a few things. There isn't a fire alarm drill practice tonight, so if the alarm just goes, you will need to leave the building. So that will either be through the door you came in or through this fire door here. There is a toilet, just the one to the left. If I could just ask everybody to switch the mobile phones off before we start or put them onto silent. There will be an interval of about 15 minutes, halfway. And the other thing I need to let you know is that this evening's poetry and music evening is being recorded. So I just need to make you aware of that. But it will be the two artists that are being recorded and not the audience. And the other thing is, in the interval, do feel free to have a look around the library, and if there's any books that you'd like to borrow. I think you might even find that Beowulf is available to hire. So do feel free to have a look round. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Claire Randall now, who's going to do an introduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol. Tolkien's Beowulf and the Hobbit. Welcome to the Headingley Lit Fest. First, may I thank the organiser of the festival and Carol Downing of Leeds Combines Arts for enabling me to give this presentation about Professor J.R.R.'s Tolkien's translation of Beowulf and its profound influence on his literary works. Beowulf is an epic poem of some 3,000 lines in Anglo-Saxon, which survives in only one original source. The poem itself is thought by many, including Tolkien, to date from the 7th or 8th century, although the manuscript can be dated to about the year 1030. I've called this talk Tolkien, Beowulf and the Hobbit, but of course Beowulf influenced all Tolkien's legendarium of Middle-earth, as he called it, and Lord of the Rings. The Hobbit is simply the main departure in his literary works which grew from there. He completed his prose translation of Beowulf in 1926, shortly after he left Leeds University, where doubtless many of you know he was made Professor of English Language here at the university in 1924. He had had an interest in the epic since his youth, and he must have worked on his interpretation of it while he was at the university and living hereabouts and at Darnley Road up the A660. The translation was only at last published in 2014 in an edition edited by son Christopher, who had been born in Darnley Road, where the Civic Trust blue plaque can be seen. Christopher apologised profusely for the fact that he considered the work unpolished and unfinished, but since Tolkien, his father, was notorious for both abandoning or endlessly revising his material, we can be glad that this is actually complete and not unfinished, like his brilliant Fall of Arthur. How polished it is, I will leave you to judge from the extracts I shall be reading. You may read translations such as those by Seamus Heaney, which is very popular, and others, which are written in a contemporary idiom and perhaps more easily understood than Tolkien's style. But Beowulf was intended for recitation by bards and minstrels at gatherings in mead halls, and Tolkien, the foremost Anglo-Saxon scholar of the modern era, captures that formality and presence lost in a more conversational style. It has been said by some that Tolkien's translations of Anglo-Saxon are actually more archaic than the originals. Many people have now seen Peter Jackson's realisations of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, but to fully appreciate the source material from Beowulf, it helps to have read Tolkien's works. The Hobbit was published in 1937 and became an immediate success, drawing, as it did, on authentic material from the Old Norse era, such as the Eddas of Snorri Sturluson for the names of the dwarf, as well as episodes from Beowulf. It evoked ancestral memories of dragons, trolls, ancient swords, heroes and kings. A key feature of Tolkien's legendarium of Middle-earth, which gives a feeling of depth, are the ever-receding vistas of antiquity referred to as asides from the main plotline. He wrote of Beowulf in 1936, "The whole must have succeeded admirably in creating in the minds of the poet's contemporaries the illusion of surveying a past, pagan but noble and fraught with a deep significance, a past that itself had depth and reached backward into a dark antiquity of sorrow. This impression of depth is an effect and a justification of the use of episodes and allusions to old tales, mostly darker, more pagan and desperate than the foreground." The structure and style of Beowulf is immensely detailed and worked up, and the closer you read it, the more you can see it influencing the world of The Hobbit. But it would be wrong to say that Tolkien is plagiarising. Rather, he is elaborating mythologies in the way that Vaughan Williams turned folk tunes into symphonies. As a young man, Tolkien had written, "I desire dragons," and in the latter part of Beowulf there is a dragon which is the model for Smaug from The Hobbit. Woken from its slumber by a servant who finds his way into the barrow and steals a golden cup from the hoard, we can see the origin of Bilbo Baggins the burglar, stealthily making his way into the secret passage in the lonely mountain and bringing back the cup to show to Thorin and the dwarves. This episode triggers the vengeful destruction of the dragon's rampage mirrored in The Hobbit. But like all good storytellers, Tolkien puts a twist in the tale, and it is not the dragon slayer, but the inheritor of the hoard who pays the ultimate price. The dragon is the main thread from Beowulf used in The Hobbit, but there are other details such as the trolls who the party meet along the way and who want to eat them, much like Grendel the ogre from the first part of the epic. When his publisher asked him for a sequel, it took Tolkien almost 15 years to bring the tale, which he said grew in the telling, to its completion. The Lord of the Rings is imbued with the spirit and character of Beowulf. Tolkien said that his tales rose first from the languages he studied and invented, and then of the peoples who would have spoken them. He sought to create a national mythology for the English, so it is no surprise that his own works proceeded out from our ancient language and the greatest surviving epic of that heroic age. I shall shortly risk my life to read the first verse of the epic in the original, to demonstrate the importance of this work to his own subcreation, as he called it. For within the first 6 lines alone in the Anglo-Saxon, there are 4 words which act as source concepts for the important features of the peoples and cultures of Middle-earth. The riders of Rohan are especially enriched by the Beowulf references. As soon as line 2 of the poem, we have Theodkninga, literally, king of the people, but almost the name of the Lord of the Mark, Theoden King. In line 3, the Athelingus are noble princes, and Athelas, kingsfoil, is the healing herb that Aragorn, prince of the house of Elendil, uses to heal the wounds given by the Nazgul. In line 5, Meodsetla, a bench where the warriors drink their mead, is the name of Meduseld, the golden horde of the Rohirrim in Edoras. And in line 6, there is Eorlas, meaning warriors, the root of Earl. The Eorlingas are the warrior horsemen of the tribe of Eorl the Young, the ancient father of their people. The references continue apace. In the first section I shall read, the funeral of Shield Chafing not only has advanced echoes of the funeral boat of Boromir, the beginning of the Two Towers, but also the elven voyages to Valinor. Beyond this, the reference to the Prince's Bark reminds us of the first line Tolkien is reputed to have ever written in his Middle-earth legendarium a century ago in 1914, concerning the voyage of Eärendil the mariner in the Silmarillion. He launched his bark like a silver spark. More source material for Rohan follows. In the second section I shall read the challenge of the guard to Beowulf, leader of the Geats, as he arrives at the cliffs below Heorot, the mead hall of King Hrothgar, presages the challenge given by Éomer to Aragorn and his companions when they rise from the field as the horsemen of the Riddermark approach. In the third section, when they arrive at Heorot, the stone-paved street and the exchange with the door warden about their lineages as they leave their weapons before they enter the mead hall to see the aged king is one of the closest matches in Tolkien with the parallel precursor in the Anglo-Saxon epic. We don't have time to hear how, when Beowulf and the king have reacquainted themselves, the counsellor Unferth mocks the Yetish leader in the manner of Grima Wormtongue, Theoden's advisor. The word Grima, meaning a mask worn by the Yetish warriors, is present in the original only a few lines before Unferth is introduced, and there is obviously a link in Tolkien's mind associating it with the deception of Wormtongue. But again, the professor engages in reversal, since in the epic, the mocking Unferth repentantly offers his sword Hrunting to Beowulf when, having dispatched the man-eating troll Grendel, the hero is required to pursue his vengeful mother, unlike Grima, who instead has hidden Theoden's sword. Hrothgar's sense of powerlessness at the loss of his men to the demons is well expressed by Theoden, grieving his son Theodred, killed by orcs. In the fourth section, after the intermission, the description of Grendel brings to mind, beg your pardon, that's not after, it's before the intermission, the description of Grendel brings to mind the accounts of the trolls in The Hobbit, or the troll in the chamber of Mazabal in Khazad-dûm, the flaming gaze of the Balrog, and not least the creeping arm and hand seen by the hobbits when caught by the Barrow-wights. After the intermission, in the fifth section, the descent into the dark mere and the slaying of Grendel's mother have resonances of the quest of Beren and Luthien into the dungeons of Morgoth and the Silmarillion. Unferth, who has already taunted Beowulf, reappears. Also, particularly, the melting of the giant's sword is clearly of influence on the account of Frodo's wounding on Weathertop by the Morgul blade of the Nazgul, and the mention of Beowulf's chain mail brings to mind Frodo's mithril shirt. In the sixth section, The Waking of the Dragon, we see almost a set piece on which the tale of Bilbo and Smaug at Erebor is modelled, with many details congruent. In the seventh and final section, The Slaying of the Dragon has clear features which can be linked to Theoden's ultimate death before the winged Nazgul in The Return of the King, although there are twists, reversals, and ornamentations to the borrowed themes. One detail I cannot let pass is the description of kings as ring givers. Golden rings were a popular reward to warriors from their kings, but anyone who has read The Lord of the Rings cannot miss the resonance with Sauron, the Lord of the Ring, who was a ring giver to dwarves and men, thereby seeking to enslave them rather than reward. Jane Sanderson will play between the excerpts, and there will be a short intermission. If you enjoy this evening, perhaps you might like to read further and either borrow a copy of the book from Headingley Library, or even I would urge you to perhaps buy a copy and support the Tolkien estate and the works of the scholar who restored Beowulf to its deserved place in the canon of both English literature, mythology, and the history of our land. And may I request that you reserve any applause for the ends of each half. Thank you. I will now just read the Anglo-Saxon introduction, and then I will go into the translation. So this is the Anglo-Saxon with the several words that he's used, and some of it will be easy to understand, some of it will be completely alien, but this is Anglo-Saxon. Beowulf of Shield Chafing. Whet, we Hiardena in Yerdagum, Theodkininga, Thrim Gefrunon, Who the Atherlingas, Ellen Fremedon. Oft shield chafing, Sithena Threatum, Monechum Maethum, Maid Settler Oftia, Exod Eolas, Sithern Erest Wirth, Feshif Funden. He thas Frofragibad, Wex under Walknum, Worth Mindum Tha, Othet him Echwilk im Sitendra, Offa Horade, here and shoulder, Yomban Gildan. That was good king. And now, the translation. Beowulf. Lo, the glory of the kings of the people of the Speardanes, in days of old we have heard tell, how those princes did deeds of valour. Oft shield chafing robbed the hosts of foemen, many peoples, of the seats where they drank their mead, laid fear upon men, he who first was found forlorn, comfort for that he lived to know, mighty grew under heaven, throve in honour until all that dwelt nigh about, over the sea where the whale rides, must hearken and yield him tribute. A good king was he. Then, at his allotted hour, Shield the valiant passed into the keeping of the Lord, and to the flowing sea his dear comrades bore him, even as he himself had bidden them, while yet their prince, he ruled the shieldings with his words. Beloved lord of the land, long was he master. There at the haven stood, with ringed prow, ice hung, eager to be gone, the prince's bark. They laid then their beloved king, giver of rings, in the bosom of the ship, in glory by the mast. There were many precious things and treasures brought from regions far away. Nor have I heard tell that men ever in more seemly wise arrayed a boat with weapons of war and harness of battle. On his lap lay treasures heaped that now must go on with him far into the dominion of the sea. With lesser gifts no whit did they adorn him with treasures of that people, than did those that in the beginning sent him forth alone over the waves, a little child. Moreover, high above his head they set a golden standard, and gave him to ocean, let the sea bear him. Sad was their heart, and mourning in their soul. None can report with truth, nor lords in their halls, nor mighty men beneath the sky, who received that load. Thereafter was fortune in war vouchsafed to Hrothgar, and glory in battle, that the vassals of his own kindred hearkened willingly unto him, and the numbers of his young warriors grew to a mighty company of men. Then it came into his heart that he would command men to fashion a hall and a mansion, a mightier house for their mead drinking than the children of men had ever known. And there within would he apportion all things to young and old, such as God had granted him, save the people's land and the lives of men. challenge of the guard to Beowulf. Then from the high shore, the watchmen of the Shieldings, who of duty guarded the cliffs by the sea, saw them bearing over the gangway bright shields and gallant harness. Anxiety smote him in his heart to learn what these men might be. He went then to the strand, riding on his horse, Hrothgar's knight, and mightily he brandished in his hands his stout spear-shaft. And in words of parley he asked, "What warriors are ye, clad in corslets, that have come thus, steering your tall ship over the streets of the sea, hither over deep waters?" "Lo, I long while have dwelt at the ends of the land, keeping watch over the water, that in the land of the Danes no foeman might come harrying with raving fleet. Never have armed men more openly here essayed to land, knowing not at all the password of men in array of war, nor having the consent of kinsmen. Never have I seen on earth a greater among men than is one of you, a warrior in arms. No hall servant is he, in brave show of weapons, if his fair countenance lie not, and his peerless mien. Now must I learn of what people you are sprung, rather than ye should pass on hence, false spies, into the land of the Danes. Come now, ye dwellers afar, voyagers of the sea, hear my thought plainly spoken. In haste it is best that ye declare whence your ways have led." To him then the chief made answer, the leader of the company opened his store of words. "We are by race men of the Geats and hearth-comrades of Hygelac. Famed among peoples was my father, a noble warrior in the forefront of battle. Ecgthar was he called. Many a winter he endured ere in age he departed from his courts. Full well doth every wise man remember him far and wide over the earth. With friendly purpose are we now come seeking thy master, the son of Halfdane, defender of his people. Be thou kindly in counsel to us. A mighty errand have we to him renowned, the Lord of the Danes, and there a certain matter shall not be kept secret, as I think. Thou knowest, if so it be, as in truth we have heard tell, that among the Shieldings I know not what deadly thing, a doer of deeds of secret hatred, on dark nights, in dreadful wise makes plain his monstrous malice, shame of men, and felling of the dead. Concerning that, with ungrudging heart, I can give counsel to Hrothgar, how he, wise and good, will overcome his enemy. Should there ever come change or betterment in the torment of his woes, how those burning griefs will be assuaged. Or else, forever after, he will endure a time of tribulation and dire need, while there in its high place abides the best of houses." The watchman spake, sitting there upon his steed, fearless servant of the king. A man of keen wit, who takes good heed, will discern the truth in both words and deeds. My ears assure me that here is a company of friendly mind towards the Lord of the Shieldings. Go ye forward, bearing your weapons and your armour. I will guide you. Beowulf comes to Heorot. The men hastened striding together until they could descry the builded hall adorned bright with gold. Foremost it was in fame of all houses under heaven among the dwellers upon earth, wherein the mighty one abode. The light of it shone over many a land. The street was paved in stone patterns. The path guided those men together. There shone corselet of war, hard, hand-linked, bright ring of iron rang in their harness, as in their dread gear they went striding straight into the hall. Weary of the sea, they set their tall shields, bucklers wondrous hard, against the wall of the house, and sat then on the bench. Corselets rang, war harness of men, their spears stood, piled together, seamen's gear, ash-hafted, grey-tipped with steel. Well furnished with weapons was the iron-mailed company. There then a knight in proud array asked these men of battle concerning their lineage. Whence bear ye your plated shields, your grey shirts of mail, your masked helms, and throng of warlike shafts? I am Hrothgar's herald and servant. Never have I seen so many men of outland folk more proud of bearing. I deem that in pride, not in the ways of banished men, nay, in greatness of heart, ye have come seeking Hrothgar. To him then, strong and bold, the proud prince of the wind-loving folk replied. Words he spake in answer, stern beneath his helm. We are companions of Hygelac's table. Beowulf is my name. To the son of Halfdane, glorious king, I wish to tell mine errand to thy lord, if he will vouchsafe to us that we may approach him in his excellence. Wulfgar spake. Noble prince of the Wendels was he. His heart's temper, his prowess and wisdom were known to many a man. This will I inquire of the friend of the Danes, lord of the Shieldings, giver of rings, concerning thy quest, even as thou prayest, and such answer quickly declare to thee as he in his goodness is minded to give. Then swiftly he returned to where Hrothgar sat, old and hoar-headed, amid his company of knights. Valiant he strode until he stood by the shoulder of the lord of the Danes. Well he knew the customs of courtly men. Wulfgar spake to his beloved lord. Here are now landed, come from afar over the encircling sea, noble men of the Geats, the chiefest of them men of arms named Beowulf. They beg to exchange words with thee, O my king. Do not make a denial to them of thy fair answer, O gracious Hrothgar. In their harness of war they seem well to merit the esteem of men. Assuredly, a man of worth is the captain who hath led these men of battle to this land. Hrothgar spake, protector of the Shieldings. I knew him while he was yet a boy. His sire of old was called Ecgtheow. To this good knight I shall offer precious gifts to reward the valour of his heart. Make haste now, bid them enter here, and look upon the proud company of our kin here gathered together. tell them too, in words of greeting, that they are welcome to the people of the Danes. Then Wulfgar went toward the door of the hall, and standing within, he pronounced these words: My victorious lord, chieftain of the East Danes, bade me say to you that he knows your lineage, and that with your dauntless hearts ye come as welcome guests to him over the surges of the sea. Now may ye go in your harness of battle beneath your masked helms to look upon Hrothgar. Leave here your warlike shields and deadly shafted spears to await the issue of your words. Then that lordly man arose, and about him many a warrior, a valiant company of knights. Some remained behind, guarding their gear of war, even as the bold captain commanded. They went with speed together, the knight guiding them beneath the roof of Heorot. Stern beneath his helm strode Beowulf, until he stood beside the hearth. Words he spake, his mail gleamed upon him, woven like stuff in crafty web by the cunning of smiths. Hail to thee, Hrothgar! I am Hygelac's kinsman and vassal. On many a renowned deed I ventured in my youth. To me, on my native soil, the matter of Grendel became known and revealed. Travellers upon the sea report that this hall, fairest of houses, stands empty and to all men useless as soon as the light of evening is hid beneath heaven's pale. Thereupon the worthiest of my people and wise men counselled me to come to thee, King Hrothgar. And now I shall with Grendel, with that fierce slayer, hold debate alone with the ogre. Now therefore will I ask of thee, Prince of the glorious Danes, defender of the shieldings, this one boon, that thou deny not to me, O protector of warriors, fair lord of peoples, since I have come from so far away, that only I may, and my proud company of men, this dauntless company, make Heorot clean. Grendel. He came now from the moor under misty fells, Grendel walking. The wrath of God was on him. Foul thief, he purposed of the race of men someone to snare within that lofty hall. Under cloud he went to where he knew full well that house of wine was, hall of men with gold bright plated. Not the first adventure that he had made, seeking for Hrothgar's home. Never in days of life before nor later with harder fortune guards in hall he found. He came now to the house, a man-shape journeying of men's mirth shorn. The door at once sprang back, barred with forged iron, when claws he laid upon it. He wrenched then wide, baleful with raging heart, the gaping entrance of the house. Then, swift on the bright patterned floor, the demon paced. In angry mood he went, and from his eyes stood forth, most like to flame, unholy light. He in the house espied there many a man asleep, a throng of kinsmen, side by side, a band of youthful knights. Then his heart laughed. He thought that he would sever, ere daylight came, dread slayer, for each one of these, life from their flesh, since now such hope had chanced of feasting full. It was no longer doomed that he yet more might of the race of men devour beyond that night. There, stern and strong, the kinsman of Heidengly watched how that foul thief with his fell clutches would now play his part, and that the slayer was not minded to delay, not he, but swiftly at the first turn seized a sleeping man, rending him unopposed, biting the bone joints, drinking blood from veins, great gobbets gorging down. Quickly he took all of that lifeless thing to be his food, even feet and hands. Then the good knight, kinsman of Heidengly, remembered his words at evening. Upright he stood and grappled fast against him. Fingers cracked. Out would the ogre go. Forth strode the knight. The accursed thing would fain, could he have done so, go free afar, and thence flee away to hollows in the fens. He felt the power of his fingers in his fierce foe's grasp. It was a woeful journey that the fell robber had to Heorot made. Fast was he held by that most strong in body's might in that day of men's life here. In no wise would that captain of men permit that deadly guest to go forth alive, nor did he account the days of his life of use to any man. Now did he perceive who aforetime had wrought the race of men many a grief of heart and wrong. He had a feud with God, that his body's might would not avail him, but the valiant kinsmen of Heidengly had him by the arm. Hateful to each was the other's life. A grievous hurt of body that fierce slayer and dire now endured. A mighty wound was seen upon his shoulder. The sinews sprang apart, the joints of his bones burst. To Beowulf was vouchsafed triumph in battle. Thence now must Grendel flee, stricken to death, to hide beneath the slopes of the fens, seeking his joyless haunts. The chief of those Yertish men had accomplished all his proud vaunt before the East Danes, and had healed, moreover, all the woe and the tormenting sorrow that they had erewhile suffered, and must of necessity endure no little bitterness. Of this a clear token it was when that warrior bold had set the hand, the arm, and shoulder beneath the widespread roof. There was all Grendel's clutching limb entire. fire. There will now be a short intermission. 2 adventures with the dragon, but we start with Beowulf's slaying of Grendel's mother. I was going to warn parents if they brought any children with them. I don't think we have any. In warrior's harness Beowulf clad him, no whit recked he of his life. His head the white helm guarded, that now he must stir the deep places of the mere. Nor yet was that thing to be misprized among his mighty aids, which to him in his need Hrothgar's sage Unferth had lent. Hrunting was the name of that hafted blade, preeminent among old and precious things was that, of iron was the blade, stained with the device of branching venom, made hard in the blood of battle. Never had it in warfare betrayed any man of those that had wielded it with hands, who had dared to achieve adventures perilous upon battlefields against their foes. This was not the first time that it was required to accomplish valorous deeds. Verily, Unferth, the son of Ecglaf, mighty of valour, remembered not that which he had before spoken, being filled with wine, when he lent that weapon to a swordsman, worthier than was he. He durst not himself beneath the warring waves adventure his life, and deeds of prowess perform. There he forfeited the glory for heroic deeds. Not so that other, Beowulf, who now had arrayed him for battle. The prince of the wind-loving Yeats hastened dauntless forth. The surging sea engulfed that warrior bold. Now the good man perceived that he was in some abysmal hall. Then did that gallant one perceive the monstrous woman of the sea, she-wolvish outlaw of the deep. To his warlike sword he lent a mighty force, nor did his hand hold back the blow. And on her head the weapon, ring adorned, sang out its lusting song of war. Soon did the invader learn that in battle shining it would bite not there, nor harm her life. Nay, that blade failed the prince at need, which aforetime had endured many a clash of blows, oft times had cloven helm and harness of the doomed. This was the first venture for that dearly prized thing, wherein its glory fell. Then did she bestride the invader of her hall, and drew her knife with broad and burnished blade. She thought to avenge her son and only child. Upon his shoulders hung the woven net of mail about his breast. This now his life defended, and withstood the entry of both point and edge. Lo, among the war gear there he beheld a sword endowed with charms of victory, a blade gigantic, old, with edges stern, the pride of men of arms, the choicest of weapons that, albeit greater than any other man might have borne unto the play of war, a goodly and costly thing, the work of giants. Now he grasped its linked hilt, that champion of the Scyldings' cause, in fierce mood and fell he flashed forth the ring-adorned blade. Despairing of his life, with ire he smote, and on her neck it bitter seized, and shivered the bony joints. Through and through the sword pierced her body doomed. She sank upon the floor, the sword was wet. The knight rejoiced him in the deed. That blade the warrior bold did not despise. Nay, he thought now swiftly to requite Grendel for those many dire assaults that he had made upon the western Danes. For that he had given him his reward, that champion in his wrath, so that on his couch he saw now Grendel lying, weary of war, bereft of life. Such hurt had he erewhile in battle got at Heorot. Far asunder sprang the corpse, when Grendel in death endured a stroke of hard sword, fiercely swung. His head was cloven from him. In that hour the valiant sword began, after the hot blood of battle touched it, to drip away in fearful icicles. A thing of wonder that, for it melted all, most like unto ice. In those abodes no more did the prince of the wind-loving Geats take of the hoarded treasures, though many such he looked upon, save that head alone, and the hilt too, all bright with gems. The sword had melted now away, and all its woven ornament was consumed. So hot that blood, so venomous was that alien creature that there had perished in the hall. Soon was he swimming swift, who had erewhile lived to see his enemies fall in war. Up dived he through the water. Then the proud company of his knights went forth to meet him, giving thanks to God, welcoming their prince with joy, that they might look upon him there unharmed. Swiftly then to the golden hall they bore the head of Grendel, until anon they came striding hither, gallant, eager in arms, those 14 Geats. Their liege lord with them, proudly among his company, trod the level ways about the hall of mead. Now in came striding that prince of knights, daring in deeds, honoured with men's praise, a mighty man of valour, greeting Hrothgar. Now Grendel's head by its locks was borne upon the hall's floor, where men were drinking. Hideous in the sight of men and of the lady in their midst, a marvellous thing to look upon with eyes. They gazed thereon. The waking of the dragon. This after came to pass in later days, in the clash of wars, when Heidgelach was fallen. Then into Beowulf's hands came that broad realm. Well he ruled it for 50 winters. Now was he a king for many years, aged guardian of his rightful land, until a certain one in the dark nights began to hold sway. In dragon, even he who on the high heath watched his hoard, his steep stone barrow. Below lay a path little known to men. Therein went some nameless man, creeping in nigh to the pagan treasure. His hand seized a goblet deep, bright with gems. This the dragon did not after in silence bear, albeit he had been cheated in his sleep by thief's cunning. This the people learned, men of the neighbouring folk, that he was wroth indeed. Soon did the dragon bestir himself, that swiftly upon the trespasser dire terror fell, yet none the less ill-fated one, when the sudden danger came on him, he saw a treasure chest. There was in that house of earth many of such olden treasures, as someone, I know not who, among men in days of yore had there prudently concealed jewels of price and mighty heirlooms of a noble race. All of them death had taken in times before. This hoarded loveliness did the old despoiler, wandering in the gloom, find standing unprotected. Even he who, filled with fire, seeks out mounds of burial, the naked dragon of fell heart that flies, wrapped about in flame. Him do earth's dwellers greatly dread. Treasure in the ground it is ever his wont to seize, and there, wise with many years, he guards the heathen gold. No whit doth it profit him. Even thus had that despoiler of men for 300 winters kept beneath the earth that house of treasure, waxing strong, until one filled his heart with rage, a man who bore to his liege lord a gold-plated goblet, beseeching truce and pardon of his master. Then was the hoard laid bare, the hoard of rings minished, and his boon granted to the man forlorn. The Lord for the first time gazed now on the olden worth of men. Then the serpent awoke, new strife arose. He smelt now along the rock, and grim-hearted he perceived the footprint of his foe, who in his stealth had stepped right nigh, yea, close to the dragon's head. The guardian of the hoard searched eagerly about the ground, desiring to discover the man who had thus wrought him injury as he lay in sleep. Burning, woeful at heart, oft times he compassed all the circuit of the mound, but no man was there in the waste. Nonetheless, he thought with joy of battle, of making war. Ever and anon he turned him back into the barrow, seeking the jewelled vessel. Quickly had he discovered this, that some one among men had explored the gold and mighty treasures. In torment, the guardian of the hoard abode until evening came. Then was the keeper of the barrow swollen with wrath, purposing, fell beast, with fire to avenge his precious drinking vessel. Now was the day faded to the serpent's joy. No longer would he tarry on the mountainside, but went blazing forth, sped with fire. Terrible for the people in that land was the beginning of that war, even as swift and bitter came its end upon their lord and patron. Now the invader did begin to spew forth glowing fires and set ablaze the shining halls. The light of the burning leapt forth to the woe of men. No creature there did that fell winger of the air purpose to leave alive. Wide might it be seen how the serpent went to war, the malice of that fell oppressor. From near and far be seen how that destroyer in battle pursued and humbled the people of the Geats. Back to his hoard he sped, to his dark hall ere the time of day. He had wrapped the dwellers in the land in flame, in fire and burning. He trusted in his barrow, in its wall, and his own warlike might, and his trust cheated him. Dragon and the Death of Beowulf. Beowulf spake, for the last time, proud words he uttered. In youth, many a deed of war I dared, and still I will, aged protector of my people, seek strife and achieve renown, if that worker of evil and ruin comes forth from his house of earth to find me. Then he addressed each of those men, bold warriors, bearing their shields, his dear comrades, for the latest time. I would not bear sword or weapon against the serpent, if I knew how else I might grapple with the fierce destroyer to mine honour, as aforetime I did with Grendel. But here do I look for fell fire's heat, for blast and venom, wherefore I have upon me shield and corslet. Yet I will not from the barrow's keeper flee 1 foot's pace, but to us twain hereafter shall it be done at the mound's side, even as fate, the portion of each man, decrees to us. Fearless is my heart, wherefore I forbear from vaunting threat against this winged foe. Then the bold warrior stood up beside his shield, resolute beneath his helm. Wearing his grim mail, he strode up to the stony cliffs, trusting in the strength of one man alone. Such is no craven's feat. Then he who, endowed with manly virtue, had passed through many a host of battles and a clash of war, when the ranks of men smote together, saw now at the mound's side a stone arch standing, from whence a stream came hurrying from the hill. The boiling water of that spring was hot with deadly fires. No man could long while endure unscorched that deep place, nigh the hoard, by reason of the dragon's flame. Now, in his wrath, the prince of the wind-loving Geats let word speed from his breast. Grim of heart, he shouted loud, so that his voice came ringing clear as a war cry in beneath the hoary rock. Hatred was aroused. The guardian of the hoard perceived the voice of man. No longer was there space for the suing of peace. Forth came first the blast of the fierce destroyer from out the rock, hot vapour threatening battle. The earth rang. The lord of the Geats beneath the mound flung round his warrior's shield to meet the dreadful comer. Now was the heart of the coiling beast stirred to come out to fight. His sword had already the good king drawn for battle, his ancient heirloom quick of edge. Each with fell purpose in their hearts knew dread of the other, but undaunted stood the prince of vassals with his tall shield against him, while the serpent swiftly coiled itself together. In his armour he awaited it. Now it came blazing, gliding in looped curves, hastening to its fate. The shield well protected the life and limbs of the king renowned, a lesser while than his desire had asked, if he were permitted to possess victory in battle, as that time on that first occasion of his life, for him fate decreed it not. The lord of the Geats flung up his arm, and with his ancient sword smote the dread foe, and the burnished edge turned on the bony body, but less keenly than its king had need, thus sore oppressed. Then was the guardian of the barrow, after that warlike stroke, in fell mood. Murderous fire he flung, wide the flames of battle sprang. No triumphant cry of victory then uttered he, from whom the Geats had love and gifts of gold. His naked blade had failed him in the cruel deeds of battle, as never should it have done, that iron tried of old. No pleasant fate was his that day, nor such that the renowned son of Eshthau should of his own will forsake that field on earth. Against his will must he inhabit a dwelling otherwhere, even as each man must, leaving the brief days of life. Then strode he through the deadly reek, his head armed for war, to the succour of his lord, and these brave words Wiglaf spoke. Beowulf, beloved, do all things well unto the end, even as thou didst vow aforetime in the days of youth, that thou wouldst not, while living, suffer thy honour to fall low. Now must thou, brave in deeds, thy noble heart unwavering, with all thy might thy life defend. To the uttermost I will aid thee. Upon these words the serpent came on in wrath a second time, alien creature, fierce and evil, assailing with swirling fires, drawing nigh unto his foes, these hated men. Now once more the king of battles recalled his renowned deeds, and Beowulf with mighty strength smote with his warlike sword, and fast in the head it stood, driven by fierce hate. Nakeling burst asunder. Beowulf's sword, old, grey-bladed, had failed him in the fight. It was not vouchsafed to him that blades of iron might be his aid in war. Too strong that hand, that, as I have heard, with its swing overtaxed each sword, when he to the battle bore weapons marvellously hard. No whit did it profit him. Then the fell fire-dragon bethought him of deeds of enmity, and rushed upon that valiant man. His neck with his sharp bony teeth he seized now all about, and Beowulf was reddened with his own lifeblood. It welled forth in gushing streams. I have heard tell that in that hour of his king's need, the good man unbowed showed forth his valour, his might and courage, as was the manner of his kin. He heeded not those jaws. His hand was burned, as valiant he aided now his kinsman, and smote that alien creature, fierce, a little lower down. A knight in arms was he, so that, bright and golden hilted, his sword plunged in, and the fire began thereafter to abate. Once more the king himself mastered his senses, drew forth the deadly dagger keen and whetted for the fray that he wore against his mail. Lord of the wind-loving folk, he ripped up the serpent in the midst. They had slain their foe, valour had vanquished life. Yea, together they had destroyed him, those two princes of one house. Of such sort should a man be, a loyal liege at need. That for the king was the last of his hours of triumph by his own deed, last of his labours in the world.
On behalf of the Headingley Lit Fest and Leeds Combined Arts, I'd like to thank very much Claire Randall for not just for suggesting this, but also for spending so much time editing the story, the poem, and still getting the story out. So thank you very much, Claire. I would also like to thank Jane Sanderson for the beautiful harp music that blended in so well with the story, and for travelling over from Keighley to do that. Thank you so much. I'd also like to thank Rimpu, Sybil and Matt from Headingley Library for allowing us to use this space and for helping to set up and everything. Thank you. If I could just ask one thing, if you could fill your feedback forms in, because we do value your comments, so please if you could do that and hand them in, that would be great. Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you.
As soon as line 2 of the poem, we have Theod Kinninga, literally king of the people, but almost the name of the Lord of the Mark, Theoden King. In line 3, the Athelingus are noble princes, and Athelas, kingsfoil, is the healing herb that Aragorn, prince of the house of Elendil, uses to heal the wounds given by the Nazgul. In line 5, Meod Setla, a bench where the warriors drink their mead, is the name of Meduseld, the golden horde of the Rohirrim in Edoras. And in line 6, there is Eorlas, meaning warriors, the root of Earl. The Eorlingas are the warrior horsemen of the tribe of Eorl the Young, the ancient father of their people. The references continue apace. In the first section I shall read, the funeral of Shield Chafing not only has advanced echoes of the funeral boat of Boromir at the beginning of the Two Towers, but also the elven voyages to Valinor. Beyond this, the reference to the Prince's Bark reminds us of the first line Tolkien is reputed to have ever written in his Middle-earth legendarium a century ago in 1914, concerning the voyage of Eärendil the mariner in the Silmarillion. He launched his bark like a silver spark. More source material for Rohan follows. In the second section I shall read the challenge of the guard to Beowulf, leader of the Geats, as he arrives at the cliffs below Heorot, the mead hall of King Hrothgar, presages the challenge given to by Eomer to Aragorn and his companions when they rise from the field as the horsemen of the Riddermark approach. In the third section, when they arrive at Heorot, the stone-paved street and the exchange with the door, it has been said by some that Tolkien's translations of Anglo-Saxon are actually more archaic than the originals. Many people have now seen Peter Jackson's realisations of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, but to fully appreciate the source material from Beowulf, it helps to have read Tolkien's works. The Hobbit was published in 1937 and became an immediate success, drawing, as it did, on authentic material from the Old Norse era, such as the Eddas of Snorri Sturluson for the names of the dwarf, as well as episodes from Beowulf. It evoked ancestral memories of dragons, trolls, ancient swords, heroes and kings. A key feature of Tolkien's legendarium of Middle-earth, which gives a feeling of depth, are the ever-receding vistas of antiquity referred to as asides from the main plotline. He wrote of Beowulf in 1936, "The whole must have succeeded admirably in creating in the minds of the poet's contemporaries the illusion of surveying a past, pagan but noble and fraught with a deep significance, a past that itself had depth and reached backward into a dark antiquity of sorrow. This impression of depth is an effect and a justification of the use of episodes and allusions to old tales, mostly darker, more pagan and desperate than the foreground." The structure and style of Beowulf is immensely detailed and worked up, and the closer you read it, the more you can see it influencing the world of The Hobbit. But it would be wrong to say that Tolkien is plagiarising. Rather, he is elaborating mythologies in the way that Vaughan Williams turned folk tunes into symphonies. As a young man, Tolkien had written, "I desire dragons," and in the latter part of Beowulf there is a dragon which is the model for Smaug from The Hobbit. Woken from its slumber by a servant who finds his way into the barrow and steals a golden cup from the hoard, we can see the origin of Bilbo Baggins the burglar, stealthily making his way into the secret passage in the lonely mountain and bringing back the cup to show to Thorin and the dwarves. This episode triggers the vengeful destruction of the dragon's rampage mirrored in The Hobbit. But like all good storytellers, Tolkien puts a twist in the tale, and it is not the dragon slayer, but the inheritor of the hoard who pays the ultimate price. The dragon is the main thread from Beowulf used in The Hobbit, but there are other details such as the trolls who the party meet along the way and who want to eat them, much like Grendel the ogre from the first part of the epic. When his publisher asked him for a sequel, it took Tolkien almost 15 years to bring the tale, which he said grew in the telling, to its completion. The Lord of the Rings is imbued with the spirit and character of Beowulf. Tolkien said that his tales rose first from the languages he studied and invented, and then of the peoples who would have spoken them. He sought to create a national mythology for the English, so it is no surprise that his own works proceeded out from our ancient language and the greatest surviving epic of that heroic age. I shall shortly risk my life to read the first verse of the epic in the original to demonstrate the importance of this work to his own sub-creation, as he called it. For within the first 6 lines alone in the Anglo-Saxon, there are 4 words which act as source concepts for the important features of the peoples and cultures of Middle-earth. The riders of Rohan are especially enriched by the Beowulf references.
Combined arts, poetry and music event as part of the Headingley Lit Fest. Just before we start, just a few things. There isn't a fire alarm drill practice tonight, so if the alarm goes off, you will need to leave the building. But that will either be through the door you came in or through this fire door here. There is a toilet for one to phones off before we start or put them onto silent. There will be an interval of about 15 minutes halfway. And the other thing I need to let you know is that this evening's poetry and music evening is being recorded. So I just need to make you aware of that. But it will be the two artists that have been recording and not the audience. And the other thing is, in the interval, do feel free to have a look around the library, and if there's any books that you'd like to borrow. I think you might even find that Beowulf is available to hire. So do feel free to have a look around. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Claire Randall now, who's going to do an introduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol. Tolkien's Beowulf and the Hobbit. Welcome to the Headingley Lit Fest. First, may I thank the organiser of the festival and Carol Downing of Leeds Combines Arts for enabling me to give this presentation about Professor J.R.R. Tolkien's translation of Beowulf and its profound influence on his literary works. Beowulf is an epic poem of some 3,000 lines in Anglo-Saxon, which survives in only one original source. The poem itself is thought by many, including Tolkien, to date from the 7th or 8th century, although the manuscript can be dated to about the year 1030. I've called this talk Tolkien, Beowulf and the Hobbit, but of course Beowulf influenced all Tolkien's legendarium of Middle-earth, as he called it, and Lord of the Rings. The Hobbit is simply the main departure in his literary works, which grew from there. He completed his prose translation of Beowulf in 1926, shortly after he left Leeds University, where doubtless many of you know he was made Professor of English Language here at the university in 1924. He had had an interest in the epic since his youth, and he must have worked on his interpretation of it while he was at the university and living hereabouts and at Darnley Road up the A660. The translation was only at last published in 2014 in an edition edited by his son Christopher, who had been born in Darnley Road, where the Civic Trust blue plaque can be seen. Christopher apologised profusely for the fact that he considered the work unpolished and unfinished, but since Tolkien, his father, was notorious for both abandoning or endlessly revising his material, we can be glad that this is actually complete and not unfinished, like his brilliant Fall of Arthur. How polished it is, I will leave you to judge from the extracts I shall be reading. You may read translations such as those by Seamus Heaney, which is very popular, and others, which are written in a contemporary idiom and perhaps more easily understood than Tolkien's style. But Beowulf was intended for recitation by bards and minstrels at gatherings in mead halls, and Tolkien, the foremost Anglo-Saxon scholar of the modern era, captures that formality and presence lost in a more conversational style.